Well, first of all, I grew up about 80 miles west here in the town of Northern Ohio Farm, actually. Went to school in Arizona and then got my first job in California. And I had a really good job in 2002. I was a sports columnist at a newspaper called the Contra Costa Times, which is a big suburban paper in the San Francisco Bay Area. And they pretty much gave me a blank check to World Series, Super Bowls, U.S. Opens. I could pretty much do what I wanted to do. So I was very appreciative of having this job. At the same time, I kind of went through a bit of a career crisis in that, whenever I wrote about who was going to quarterback the 49ers and who should coach the Raiders and whether Barry Bonds was on steroids, it's like, at the end of the day, did it really matter? Rat fishing at the bottom of the birdcage, I just was looking for a story I felt like that would resonate. And during this time, there's this old high school a mile from my office and on my way home every night that just keeps winning these football games. They won their 73rd in a row to break the national record for consecutive victories. They won their 100th in a row. They just kept going. They were in the midst of a 151 game winning streak. And I would have to go sometimes over there and write. And it got to the point where I don't care how good of a writer you are, writing me a column on deadline about another 44 to 10 win, which was the average score for the NFL, which got pretty tedious. So I started kind of asking for access. This coach, who's the coach there, Bob Gladys, very interesting guy, just a different kind of cat. I've been around the game my whole life. He was like no one I'd ever met before. And he let me in one time to one of the biggest high school football games ever. And he said, "You're going to be really bored." I said, "No way, man, it's going to be great." And it was really boring. He doesn't believe in pregame speeches. He doesn't do anything. And you're sitting in there, there's 30,000 people waiting outside. And finally he says, "Well, I guess it's time to go up." Get up and go up, that's it. And then another time at halftime, it was a huge game, and the street was on the line. And all the kids were looking at him with kind of hungry eyes and asking, "Help me out, what do we do? Shoes, gaps, let's see what I got." And Lad said, and I've been around games so much in the NFL and college football, and every coach is the control freak. And he said, "Why do I always have to be the problem solver?" See, like, group problem solving is a skill you use your whole lives. Why don't you guys figure it out? Turn around and walk away from it. And darn if the kids didn't put their heads together and figure it out. And the second half is another 44 to 10 and whatever. And I just thought, there was a guy that was kind of empowering these guys, just sucking up all the control, making the decisions, kind of empowering them to make decisions. So, I just kind of kept hanging around and nosing around on this program during the summer of 2002. And one day I showed up and they were cleaning out the coaches' offices. And they put a big dumpster up in the coaches' offices. VHS tapes and files and papers, and cleats and state championship trophies and helmets and everything. And they were just chucking stuff into the dumpster. State championship trophies, California Coach of the Year trophies, and balls. And I was like, wow, these guys don't measure success the way a lot of people measure success. So I just became more and more intrigued that summer. And a couple conversations I had with Coach Lattiser that summer convinced me that I write this book. And I brought this copy along because I can't ever memorize this whole thing. But one time, he said, "Kids respect true humility and that you stand for something more than winning. They'll fight for you and your program if you stand for more than that. It boils down to what you believe in as a person. I'm talking about how life should be lived and how people should be treated. Kids see all that. It's a whole package of things that have nothing to do with standing in front of a team with a piece of chalk. You can know who to block and what play to call, but it has no meaning unless the kids know who you are. Our kids aren't fighting for wins. They're fighting for a belief in what we stand for." And that was the quote where I think I got a book here, had to write a book. So then I just had to convince him to let me.
Well, it sounds like they did things very differently than other high school football programs, other football teams in general. And I think we pride ourselves on making a deliberate choice and be different than our competitors. So I'm just kind of curious, maybe you can expand on that topic. What else caught your eye, or what else intrigued you that Coach Ladd and the team did differently?
Well, there was another quote where he said, he talked about that we've actually got a lot of slack for the title to move when the A stands tall. He said, what's that mean? And that came from another quote where he said, game by itself doesn't stand tall. In a certain sense, it's barbarism. For me, it's about getting kids to play together and work together and accomplish something together and learn to work with each other. Without that, the game doesn't stand tall. So it was kind of a series of those events through that summer where I just realized that this cat was kind of coming at the sport from a whole different level than I'd ever seen it before. The no pregame speeches, he called it saber rattling. Kids would get up and say, well, we're going to go out there tomorrow night and kick it. He'd say, don't say me. You don't want to talk about yourself. You don't know what he's going to do. You can only talk about what you're going to do. So it was, in football, they always say no I in team, but he really emphasized the I because that's what you can control. So it was just a whole list of things as I snooped around that program that summer that convinced me that, man, there's something special going on here.
Did he support the building the story into a book?
I pestered him, and Ladd has now, this would be a funny story later. Like when the movie came around, he could have cared less. So I just kept asking him. Everyone wanted to know, how do you do this? What's the secret? How do you do it? And finally one day I kind of wore him down, and he said, the only answer to that question is if you show up every day for a year. And so I took that as an opening. I said, okay. So I showed up every day for a year, kind of called this bluff. I'm sure he regretted it as I followed around with a clipboard and a legal pad for 12 months. But what I learned is if you quit being an outsider when you show up every day for a year, there comes a point where all of a sudden you're an insider, and that's just kind of the way it happened.
Well, you certainly put in the effort to research the team, and a lot of, when you watch the movie and read about the team and the coach, you kind of really get a sense for kind of their intensity, a different type of intensity than other football teams maybe exhibit, but it kind of reminded me of what we talk about in our office about having kind of a consciousness of purpose and kind of a real determination in what you're doing and putting forth the effort. Did you, well, I guess, I know perfect effort's a big part of this philosophy.
And when Kieran, first talked to me about doing this, and thanks for the opportunity, but I looked up what you guys do and started to do some research and realized, your company is providing technology and software for hospitals and nonprofits. People are trusting you with their livelihoods and their life work and their databases. And I think trust is a big word, and I think it goes to the very heart of what De La Salle and what Ladouceur teaches too, because that whole program kind of comes down to this relationship where they say, look, I can count on you and you can count on me. And I think that takes a leap of faith to do that, to make that decision to do that. But playing that program, you have to make that decision. And so I do think there's a lot of applications that apply throughout business and everyday life.
Can you maybe share for those that haven't read the book or watched the movie, kind of what what they meant by a perfect effort?
Yeah, definitely. The one thing Ladd says is, and it's just like you guys in business, I'm sure, and I've never been a businessman, but you can't control what client takes your call or whatever, but what you can control is the effort you put into it. And that was always his thing. And I remember a quote directly from Ladd that we used in the movie, where he said, look, no one's perfect. You can't expect yourself to be perfect, but what you can do is you can expect from yourself and from your teammates a perfect effort. And I think when you combine that perfect effort with the preparation necessary, that equals success. And that's what I really discovered at De La Salle is I spent a year with them and never heard them once talk about winning. it never came up. It was always about your first step on 13 gear if you're the tackle. You know, why your head's too high, or your hips are too low, or, you know, it was never, winning just kind of became a byproduct of all the other things they were doing.
That's great. I'm sure it was easier said than done. I'm sure you witnessed this tremendous work ethic in the group, and I'm just kind of curious to hear about Coach Lattiser's work ethic and his leadership style specifically.
Well, and the whole thing about secret to success is one thing that came up over and over again. I think it annoyed Lance because he didn't feel like there was a secret to success. He felt like